As I often say, facts are generally on the side of the Democratic Party and the progressive left, but facts don't speak for themselves. And so thankfully, President Biden traveled to Colorado today to convey the positive economic impact of his agenda and his legislation on that purple state. And in so doing, he used the opportunity to distinguish himself and his party from the Republican Party. And he specifically called out two MAGA Republicans, the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and Colorado's own Lauren Boebert, both of whom have recently tried to associate themselves with or take credit for the agenda that they opposed. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, folks, we got a couple of clips to play. And again, just a disclaimer, I'm feeling under the weather, so if I sound strange or make any weird faces, just please bear with me. Anyway, this is President Biden speaking in Pueblo, Colorado about his agenda, and he calls out in this clip Colorado's own Lauren Boebert.
When I took office, I vowed I'd be president for all Americans, whether you live in a blue state or a red state, whether you live in rural or urban areas. And we're delivering on that promise. But folks, we haven't gotten a whole lot of help from some members of Congress on the other side of the aisle in the United States Congress. The historic investments we're celebrating today is in Congressman Boebert's district. She's one of the leaders of this extreme MAGA movement. She, along with every single Republican colleague, voted against the law that made these investments in jobs possible. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. And then she voted to repeal key parts of this law. And she called this law a massive failure. You all know you're part of a massive failure?
Now, before we go on, what President Biden is referring to specifically is the Inflation Reduction Act, which, unlike other aspects of his agenda, was a strictly partisan piece of legislation. Every Republican opposed it, including Lauren Boebert, and yet here they are reaping the rewards from it.
Tell that to the 850 Coloradans who get new jobs in Pueblo and see us win thanks to this law. Tell that to the local economy that's going to benefit from these investments. Tell that to anyone who wants to listen. Tell with thanks to Congressman, I think what she calls a massive failure, a solar power company that's investing $400 million here in Colorado, creating for 56,000 homes, create 250 good-paying jobs. LightSource BP is building a new solar farm just down the road from here to power an additional 53,000 homes. Across Colorado, Xcel Energy is investing $1.7 billion to improve the state's electric grid. And folks, none of that sounds like a massive failure to me. How about you?
So, and again, in addition to calling Lauren Boebert out, which is always gratifying, it's really important that Biden is taking the position that the facts, again, don't speak for themselves. And he's using the opportunity to tell constituents, Colorado constituents in a purple state, what he has done to benefit them despite Republican opposition. Now, again, as a bit of a refresher, I pulled two clips, just random clips, of Lauren Boebert publicly stating her opposition to President Biden's agenda, just as a refresher to remind you that Biden is absolutely correct.
And we need to be holding people accountable. I'm a member of the Freedom Caucus, and I'm actually a newly elected board member of the Freedom Caucus. And we are getting involved in primaries all throughout the country to make sure that we not only take back the House, but we take back the House with conservative fighters who are not going to assist the Democrats in their massive spending sprees, in their terrible policies, and who will align with the American people and the promises that they made on the campaign trail.
So there she is complaining about President Biden's agenda as a spending spree and terrible policies and threatening to primary those few Republicans who occasionally, like with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, those few Republicans who do support the president's agenda because they recognize it benefits their constituents. And this is one other clip, again, of Lauren Boebert basically conveying the same thing.
And don't think I'm letting Biden's 13 Republicans off the hook for voting for that so-called infrastructure bill.
So they're again threatening political consequences against the 13 Republicans who voted for President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure bill, which again is benefiting, red states immensely. Red states arguably even more than blue states. And yet, just today, we also have a tweet from Lauren Boebert taking a complete 180 saying, proud to have worked with Colorado's bipartisan delegations to secure important funding for the Arkansas Valley conduit that will provide an abundant supply of clean water for 50,000 people in southeastern Colorado. So just a complete 180 when it's when it's convenient for her. Now, before we move on to President Biden calling out Mike Johnson, which is also gratifying, just want to remind you that Lauren Boebert is in dire straits politically, electorally. So she won barely re-election in 2022. Okay, she won by like a margin of 500 votes. She came this close to losing that race. And the guy whom she narrowly defeated, Adam Fritsch, has taken another crack at the title. And he is kicking her ass in fundraising. I think it was last quarter, he raised not only $3 million, but in terms of like comparison, what he raised was almost 4 times the amount that Lauren Boebert raised in that same time period. And she has lost critical Colorado Republican endorsements because of her personal behavior, such as the, Beetlejuice grope incident. I don't know if we're going to call it like the grope tapes or the grope water scandal. I don't know. We have to come up with something about it. But anyway, this is President Biden, also in Colorado, calling out Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who basically did the same thing that Lauren Boebert did.
As a matter of fact, the new Republican Speaker of the House, along with Republican Congressman Vern Buchanan, just visited Sarasota, Florida yesterday to tour the construction of a new terminal at that airport. It's going to create thousands of jobs over time. The project is funded with nearly $30 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And it's going to generate more than $30 million for Florida multiple times over. And guess what? Both the Speaker and the Congressman voted against the law and spoke against the law. But now they're down there taking credit for it being built. As my mother would say, God love him. As one of my friends back home would say, that's real chutzpah.
So again, funny, important, again, because the facts don't speak for themselves. And certainly the Republicans like Mike Johnson, like Lauren Boebert, are not going to remind their constituents that, yeah, actually, not only did I vote against this, I outspokenly oppose it in terms of rhetoric. They're not going to do that. They're just going to make sure that they're at the groundbreaking, which is why President Biden so often says, I'll see you at the groundbreaking, because they want to be associated with investments in their community. They want to have their cake and eat it too. Now, a Democratic Congresswoman also from Florida, called Mike Johnson out. So Mike Johnson, who's visiting the Sarasota International Airport, she called out Mike Johnson and other Republicans. She says, bless their hearts, they have no shame. U.S. Representative Kathy Castor called it awkward and shameful to cheer a project by a $1 trillion infrastructure package Johnson voted against. Castor, a Tampa Democrat, supported the bill. And this, again, it was passed with very minor help from 13 Republicans. And so this is what I've said before, that the Republican Party has no shame, and their shamelessness is their superpower, right? Because, as we've often discussed, Democrats are held to absurdly high standards. There's no margin for error. There's no room for hypocrisy. There's no room for double standard, and there probably shouldn't be. But Republicans get a free pass, and sort of this behavior that we see from them, this is characteristic. This is common. This is what they do. And so, because facts don't speak for themselves, it's incumbent on President Biden, yes, but also the entire Democratic apparatus, not just the elected officials, but also their surrogates in the media, and anybody who is, again, not a conservative. So even people like me, I'm not, I'm not part of the Democratic machine. I'm a registered Democrat. I'm a Democratic voter. I certainly favor Democrats over Republicans. But you and I, every single one of us, have to make the case that President Biden's agenda and the Democratic agenda has made a materially beneficial impact in the lives of Americans, and Republicans have tried to thwart them every step of the way. Let me know what you think in the comments.